Om Mani Padme Om Mani Padme Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to practice the metta meditation first. After the meditation, Chandana Bhikkhu is going to give a Dhamma talk. After that, question and answer and chanting. Now, Venerable Panyaloka is going to lead the metta meditation.
Sit in a comfortable position. Relax your bodies. Relax your minds. Now we are going to practice the loving kindness meditation. With these guided meditation thoughts, practice the loving kindness meditation for a couple of minutes. If you're only comfortable, close your eyes and reflect on these loving kindness thoughts. May I be well, happy, peaceful, and free from suffering. May no harm come to me. May no difficulties come to me. May no problems come to me. May I always find fulfillment. May I also have patience, courage, understanding, determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May my teachers, Dharma teachers, parents, brothers and sisters, friends and relatives, my enemies also, all the beings in the universe also be well and happy, peaceful and free from suffering. May no harm come to them. May no difficulties come to them. May no problems come to them. May they always find fulfillment. May they also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life. May all beings in the universe be well, happy, and peaceful. Practice these loving kindness thoughts for a couple of minutes. After your silent meditation, when you hear the bell, open your eyes and experience the bliss of this moment.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Panyaloka. It's now time to the Dhamma talk. Today, our speaker, Chandana Bhikkhu. I believe he's there right now, ready. Chandana, you are there?
Yes, Bhante.
All right. You can start your talk.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami. Greetings, everyone. Taking refuge. Taking refuge. That's what I just did, the triple gem, for some of you who might not know what those words meant. Often, as human beings, we find ourselves unable to have our needs met, to get them met, just basic needs. Decades ago, almost a century ago, Abraham Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs. The most basic is, it's like a pyramid, think of it, and the bottom most layer, the biggest one, happens to be just basic things: shelter, food, and safety. A big one nowadays for us. There's a major lack today. And as a species, as human beings, we're really, really struggling to get that need met. It's a basic need. And it's rarely being met. So what to do? What can we do? We've pretty much, if you've lived an adult life up to this point, you've pretty much have tapped into different sorts of refuges and resources and ways of, anchor yourself in some form of a refuge. And that also means that along the way, we've had quite a number of disappointments, which is normal, natural. But what we're facing today, and we've been facing for over a year now, is somewhat unprecedented, not because of the nature of what it is in front of us, but because of the volume of it and how spread out it is. The fear I'm talking about. We've had the worst things that we have dealt with as a species. But just the element of fear that is so prevalent, so thick you can cut it with a knife, the air. That's how thick it is. I don't have to tell you, we are all living it. We're all living it in different ways, in different capacities. So what is the relationship of that, this, whatever we're going through, and refuge? The need. Yesterday, one of the meditators during the retreat that I give on a weekly basis mentioned, Bhante, meditation seems to be the best refuge we got. In fact, the words he used was, it's the best insurance policy. He was mentioning basically in the context of getting phone calls from places like Forest Lawn and cemetery and funeral services, because, which makes you think and wonder about, wait a minute, do they know something I don't? and the fear gets more and more intense. We start fanning the flames. So there's chaos. When there's no safety, there's chaos. If you've ever gone hungry a little bit over the time period that you usually get a bite to eat, if you go over that, all of a sudden, the body is somewhat in a havoc. It doesn't know what to do because this is starvation mode. What are you doing to me? That's what the body says. And it starts to tap into your liver and all that to get to resources or reserves, fat reserves, to break them apart. But it is, relatively speaking, a panic state of being for the body. Now add to that, that's the physiological aspect of things, but there's also the psychological that we are dealing with on a tremendous level. This is a time period where meditation is no longer a luxury. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, New Age time, this and that, people were like, yeah, I'll dabble with meditation and I'll do some mantra, I'll do this and I'll do that. Yeah, I need to relax. I need to just get into the zone. Now we do meditation to keep our sanity. We need to do it. We need to practice it. We need to have some form of a refuge. Okay, why the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha? As a bhikkhu, I say those words, but also as a layperson. When I was a layperson, I would chant those words. And on my journey, I would ask my teachers, like, Bhante, why, like, what does this mean? I take refuge in the Buddha. I mean, obviously, the man has died 2,600 years ago. Am I taking refuge in his memory? What is it? Many teachers over the course of time have said it is having faith that another human being was able to reach the ultimate. Having faith. For all those of us who think that there is no faith in Theravada Buddhism, there is. There's quite a bit of it, in fact. That's the starting point. But it's not blind faith. But we need to start from a good place of, you know what? I see myself also tapping into that, getting to that state. I look around and I don't see myself qualified for it, but hey, there's a promise somewhere. I could. That I could is the spark that is necessary. That's the smile that we need in the beginning of the day, the moment of waking. It is not just blind hopefulness, but you're starting a baseline for yourself. It's a brand new sheet of paper, crisp, white, not even a dot on it, waiting. Unfortunately, however, we carry a lot of junk from yesterday and the days before. So taking refuge is crucial because we need to start. We can start from a place of fear, which we all are very familiar with, but we also know where that leads. In clinical sessions, for example, when a patient would come and they tell me they unload, they just want to tell me everything, all things that are going wrong. And after carefully, compassionately, empathetically listening, you look for that space that you can squeeze in edgewise. And then you share with them from a good place this image. Imagine you're standing up and looking at a photograph of a landscape or anything or a painting. But instead of looking at it from about 5 feet away, you actually have your nose into it like that. And sometimes I would deliberately place a painting or a photograph in my session room for that purpose, at height level, so normal. And I would ask them if they would agree to it, they feel okay about it, and then they would get up and they would approach, and I said, please get closer. They get closer. I was like, closer if you can. I was like, are you serious? Yes. Get your nose to touch the canvas or the glass or whatever it is. Yes, please indulge me. This is a good intervention. And they get so close and they're like, this is ridiculous, Doc. And I said, yeah, it is. But please tell me if you see anything. Well, it's a blur. I was like, yeah, what else can you see? Do you see any color? Well, kind of like maybe purplish blue. I say, okay, could you please do us both a favor and take about 10 inches of a distance, create that distance between you and the painting. And they do. And all of a sudden, things become clearer. The colors, the shapes, the forms, and the theme, the relationship of the objects, all of a sudden have some form of a meaning. And I say, take another step back. And slowly, slowly, they get what I'm trying to do. When we talk about tunnel vision or being fixated on a problem, these are images, but they are not like, we don't feel them viscerally. And fear is one of the most toxic emotions. And it's so pervasive and it's so prevalent these days. It's so stripping us of life. People are slowly dying, and not from COVID, from depression, from what might happen. And that has turned into a negative addiction. We want to look at the numbers. We want to look at the news. What are they saying? What are the so-called experts are saying? And meanwhile, we're really squeezing our faces this time into the painting, past the wall, in fact. There's no refuge at that point. What about our basic needs for safety, shelter, love? Love. Love brings it with it a lot of openness, room for breathing, for being. And when we take refuge in the triple gem, that's what we're trying to make room for ourselves to feel that. So when I talk about Nibbana, for example, it's not a taboo word for me. It's not a taboo reality for me. It's a reality. And that's how I teach it to students, because it was a reality when the Buddha taught it and when his arahants have been teaching it and experiencing it. But one of the very important criteria in the whole process of the Dhamma, practicing of the Dhamma, is the sense of shelter, refuge, which we are making for ourselves. Imagine you're sitting in a jungle, in a forest, and there's wild animals walking around. You have tigers, you have cobras, king cobras that eat cobras. You have all kinds of critters walking maybe on you. The very important thing is, more importantly than food, is feeling shelter. So you're completely open. So for such a long time, to this day, there are bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, individuals who sit and practice meditation while feeling settled. Now, obviously, we don't have to be in a Southeast Asian jungle to feel those threatening modes of being or thinking or feeling. We have some equally devastating and terrorizing thoughts, states of mind that we already are facing in the so-called comfort of our room in this lockdown, namely fear. So what I'm trying to have us look at is to observe the Dhamma, to look at the Dhamma, and to start practicing it within that context of providing ourselves shelter, a very much needed shelter, and not something that I need to go and get. I read some time ago a quote from the late actress, Hollywood actress, Katharine Hepburn. She said something along the lines of, loving is not expecting what we might get from the world, from the thing, from whatever, the person. But true loving, the process of loving, that whole experience of loving has everything to do with our own expectations of giving to the world. But before we start giving to the world, we need to start giving it to ourselves. How do we do that? Can you dedicate 5 minutes of your day where you say to your own fear-mongering thoughts, the habits, hey, 5 minutes, I am going to make this completely vacuous of any sort of fear. Make this agreement with yourself. Meanwhile, you still have about 23 hours and 55 minutes to just run amok and just do whatever you want, terrorizing me to bits. But during those 5 minutes, that's my safe zone. You are not allowed to walk in. Can we make that agreement? Can we shake on it? This is happening between yourself and you. So it's amazing how the mind will respond to such agreements, because we do have agreements all the time, unspoken agreements, latent agreement that we take very seriously, but the world has no clue about. We do this also with our partners, our people that mean something to our lives. Meanwhile, we never share these agreements or contracts, secret contracts, that is. So let's turn that on its head and offer ourselves some room to breathe. Essentially, that's what we're doing when we're meditating, when we have a consistent practice. Obviously, 5 minutes a day is not sufficient to meditate, but it is something when you've never had that routine. So we have to start from somewhere. So ideally, I would say anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. If you can start like the first week with 30 minutes a day, but keeping it around the same time, that's great. But make that agreement take place. Whereabout you go ahead and say to yourself, listen, when I'm in the kitchen, when I'm doing this, when I'm working, when I'm doing this, whatever, you guys could come in and roam free. All these fears and all these things. But during those 30 minutes or 15 minutes, no. There's a quarantine for you. You cannot. It's like a bubble. And see how that, how you respond to that. And this way we start to actually care for ourselves. Oftentimes we feel that we do not deserve to feel good. I mean, on the outside, on the surface, it sounds ridiculous. Like, who doesn't? But in leadership classes that I've taught in college, universities, sometimes I would see this, where the person starts to literally sabotage themselves in their mind. They do not want to see themselves becoming successful. They face that for the first time. And I've seen people just shed so many tears over this, in this realization that, oh my God, I am not willing to see myself happy. I must be screwed up in the head. Something's wrong. No, we just have had this habit of thinking that I do not deserve from me. But I'm going to go ahead and point the finger at the world and say, you need to give me this and that and this. I need love from you. Meanwhile, we're the last person to offer it to ourselves. So that is the thing that we're taking a refuge in, first and foremost. Otherwise, it's just a statue of a Buddha or a painting or a picture of a Buddha. It really is not doing anything. It's just like a blind ritualistic thing that's happening. It's totally useless, in my opinion. Unless we take that example and bring it in and start to live it, taste it. That's what the Buddha says. Pachatam veditabbo vinyuhiti. It is to be realized by the wise for themselves, by themselves. So happiness is one of the major characteristics of the Nibbana, because the person is no longer captive. They're no longer a captive to suffering, to this negative cycle and unending cycle of suffering. And this might be shocking for some, but the suffering is never going to be coming from the outside world. When I heard this, I thought it was blasphemy. How could you say that? Yes, if we're alive, there's going to be death, there's going to be impermanence, there's going to be sickness, there's going to be this and that, all of which are just deplorable. A pain to even think about, let alone witness. These have been going on before we showed up, and they're going to continue while we're alive, and they're going to continue while we're no longer here. Just like the 5 aggregates that we have in this body. It is destined, it's actually its nature to get old, to get sick, and to die. But I want to maintain it. It's like the image that the Buddha gives in the Nikayas. He says, how do you get sesame oil? And they say, Bhante, we get it because there's a tool for squeezing the sesame seeds, and there's a process, and we squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, and there you go. Voila, we have sesame oil. Okay. He says, if you do the whole process, spend the time, use all these tools and techniques, but you start with grains of sand, are you going to get sesame oil or any type of oil? It's grains of sand. You say, no, Lord, it's just going to be powdery sand, I guess, but nothing oily is going to come out. So we need to know how we are starting the project. We're starting our day, the biggest project. Am I going through the steps while using the wrong ingredients? And the wrong ingredient is having a flawed position, yet expecting something totally different. So I'd like to invite you to consider bringing more of those gaps, those safety zones in your life, where you truly give room for yourself to breathe the free air of happiness, of joy that stems from here. How do I do that? Let's create this vacuum where you literally promise yourself you will not be thinking about the worst case scenario during those few minutes. And in psychotherapy, for example, if a little bit of a side, like tangential thing that I'm offering here, but to kind of drive it home even better, with couples, for example, who can't stand each other. One of the tricks that therapists could use is it's called actually paradoxical intervention. And what therapists sometimes use, not every therapist wants to use them these days for some reason, but I have fun with this. You go ahead and tell, let's say, the partners who are there, next time you feel affectionate, even if you want to touch their hand, don't. It's taboo. For 3 days, you're not allowed to touch them, to look at them with affectionate eyes, for example. Eventually, what that creates is this rebellion, this like, how dare this clinical character telling us not to be affectionate when I feel affection towards loved one. So what that creates is the opposite. So suddenly, what was not there, but was craved, longed for, now there's a sufficient enough of a space for it to blossom, to grow. And that's what this can be viewed as well. The 5 minutes or 1 hour of meditating, or just sitting there without worrying, being afraid of whatever outcomes might come in tomorrow or today, later. And just saying, you know what, I will not think of any of these, but the following hour, let me just go crazy. Think about the worst case scenarios. Write it down. The building's going to fall on my head, this is going to be the worst case. Just write them down. Eventually, the brain is going to see what's happening, and they're just going to go, what's wrong with me? And then there's a lovely laughter that follows. And we realize how foolish the mind is. But it can be the most amazing tool that can take us all the way to Nibbana. Sometimes people are shocked when I mention how the mind is our worst enemy. But if we know how to work it, it can be our biggest, strongest ally. The strongest, most intimate friend we've never had. There it is. So I will leave you with that. And I don't know what time, Bhante, could you chime in? Because I would like to have...
almost a quarter to the 12. So you can stop. If we have any question, we can ask.
Wonderful.
And comment or whatever. Mm-hmm. We'll see. Thank you, Chandana, again, and happy to see you, and take care of yourself, okay? We may have question. Nick, yes. Nick, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Bhante. That's exactly the talk I needed to hear today. This week, I've been working on what does it mean when I take refuge in the Buddha. Part of my practice is taking the refuge in the morning, and I've been meditating on Buddho, and I'd like to hear, I think you gave some examples of what I can practice, and I'll listen again to see what I missed. But can you talk a little bit about what I can do, what actions can I take to practice taking refuge in the Buddha?
A lovely question. I did a short Dhamma talk about a month ago specifically on Buddho. Buddho, it's sometimes people call it a mantra. I don't necessarily agree with that, but because it is actually one of the qualifiers of Lord Buddha. There's the 3 refuges, right? So the triple gem, we call them. So the Buddha has several qualifiers. And then there's a Dhamma that has the qualifiers. So, Itipiso Bhagava Arahan Samma Sambuddho Vijjacana. There's Buddho there. Buddho there. So any of these qualifiers can be taken as a meditation object. In fact, in Thai forest tradition, they strongly practice this. So it is a tool. It is a tool. Now, what we do with that tool is up to us. So there isn't any special magic or anything, but it is a wonderful tool. I use that with some students, or a majority of the time I use metta, loving kindness, which is also a powerful, powerful tool. Both of these can take you straight to Nibbana, by the way, as does the breath, because these are just tools. Now, how do we use these tools to be anchored and to take refuge in it? When you are, I'm going to just go ahead and use your example, because that is your object of meditation, Buddho. When you are doing Buddho, for example, are you doing it with the breath? Are you doing it, so for example, Bud, you could do it in the form of an inhale, and then Dho in the form of the exhale. That's in the preliminary stages. Eventually you can just internalize it and it goes in and it becomes subvocal, and then it becomes mental. It just becomes a matter of awareness. You just have to think about it and you're there. Now, when you are there, is it just a word, or are you fully submerged in it? Now, because it's a word and it's a qualifier, it almost has this abstract feel to it, almost non-tangible, versus, again, this has to do with your own disposition, your own constitution, if you will, what type of a learner you are, etc. So for a person who responds better to loving kindness, love, relatability becomes a little bit more tangible to them. And it's far quicker to identify if it's just a matter of mental one-pointed type of concentration. That is the dangerous part, because you need to open yourself up to Buddho, just like you need to open yourself up to metta. What that means is we have certain expectations when we do something, and especially when we are getting into meditation. We want to get something, like I was mentioning about Katharine Hepburn. So you need to allow yourself to just drop that. I know it's easier said than done. The expectation, and you're making yourself vulnerable to possibilities. Vulnerability doesn't mean something that you're now exposed to harm. You're also exposed to wonderful things to happen, because you're opening room. You're emptying up, you're just draining the cup. All of a sudden there's room. So Buddho, if you approach Buddho in that fashion, or a breath, or metta, with that openness in your mind, whatever happens, let it happen. And observe what is happening, that is key. Otherwise, you're just drifted back into one-pointed concentration, which is not going to give you any panya. That's why the Buddha's technique is totally different than what was taught by his contemporaries, what he'd practiced before becoming a Buddha. So we need wisdom. So Buddho can open up as long as your attitude is. I hope that, I know the time constraint doesn't allow me to go deeper than this, so I apologize. So does that work for you?
More meditation. Thank you.
And the attitude in the meditating. Yes. Vincent, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Bhante. I wanted to know, what's your idea on determining whether or when you're using meditation as escapism versus taking refuge or shelter, you know, in the three jewels.
If the person is aware that they're running away from something, then there is a presence of wisdom there, which is a huge step. Unfortunately, oftentimes the teacher has to really probe by asking series of questions, and we don't have the luxury of living with students like on a massive scale where we observe constantly what they're doing, how their behavior. Do their behaviors match what they're saying, what they're reporting during their private interviews? Because there's a lot of cheating going on. The behavior, on the other hand, will tell us point blank what's really taking place. So there's an escapism otherwise. So when there is, the proof is in the pudding, right? So when the meditation is being done properly, and it's not a matter of suppression. Suppressing what? Suppressing the nivarana, which are the hindrances. So every time anger shows up, for example, what do I do? What is my technique? Do I use, for example, Nick's example of Buddha? Squeezing it down, pressing it down. Or metta. No, I'm supposed to love this person, but he's a jerk. I don't care. Let me practice. Da, 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 da. Press, 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 press. Guess what happens? Just like a pressure cooker, boom, blows up in my face when I least expect it. So there is no wisdom there. What that means is the person has been simply practicing one pointed concentration, which unfortunately is what most people are doing today in the guise of, in the name of mindfulness even, or Buddhist practice. They've just fallen into the Visuddhimagga and other things that have been widely influential in the West even, in Theravada traditions as well, where the focus is only on focus, 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 focus. Well, there's no room for wisdom. Wisdom is going to tell you if whether the person has been escaping or understanding. The word that the Buddha used is pajanati. Yata bhutang pajanati. The person is now able to see how things are taking place in themselves, in their mind, in their behavior, as well as in the world, but first in their behavior. So coming back to Nick's question, how can I really develop deeper with any tool, right? Suddenly you're able to observe how things are happening. What happens first? So there is this energetic enthusiasm that is taking place, this curiosity, like a child. It's like, what was that? Like, what's happening there? Why? Where did this anger come from? Why did I get irritated? Oh, and then you trace it back. What happened before? What happened before? All of a sudden, you find out that somebody looked at you in a nasty way last week, but you never processed it. You suppressed it. Aha. So now, when a person has been practicing for 20, 30 years, and they have this huge tension in their head, and they come and tell me, oh, I've been practicing for 30, 40 years, I do vipassana, I do this, but they have this huge iron ball in their brain. It's just a series of one suppression after another. And I do not enjoy being around those people. I've been there. I've seen them yell and even hit a pet dog simply because they were like, but what happened to all that metta? All 40 years of meditation, where did it go? So there isn't wisdom there. Meanwhile, meditation is all about wisdom. So I hope that is answering or touching on your question a little bit.
Thank you. Yes.
Wonderful. Bhante, do we have time for one more question? I'm sorry, by the way, I can't look at the chat because it throws me off. I know that there's some text box coming in I'm not reading. If there's any questions, I would be more than happy. I think we have, what time is it? 5 more minutes. Bhante, do we have time for a question?
What is, the Rick is asking, what is the meaning of the Buddha?
It's just the name of the Buddha. Think of it just
Yes.
Buddha. Dhammo Sangho. It's the same thing. Buddho Dhammo Sangho. But in the case of the Buddha, it's just isolating that quality. It is also, if you want to look at the word meaning, obviously, there's disagreement on part of the commentators as to what exactly. I've seen people say illuminated one, the awakened, the wisdom, Lord. There's a series of awakened, what else? Wakefulness, no longer being in prison, which connects us to Nirodha, which is another word for Nibbana. Ni is a prefix that is used to create an antonym. So Nirodha or Nibbana is the opposite of what the root word is saying. So Vana or Bhana means, Nibbana means like no more movement, no more fire. Fire moves. Fire of what? Craving. And in the fire sermon, where there were 1,000 fire worshipping yogis in a place called Gayasissa in Rajgir, a beautiful place, by the way, if you ever get a chance to go. And there's this wonderful like protrusion of this boulder at the edge of the mountain where the Buddha sat. And there were 1,000 yogis, fire worshipping yogis, who had become his students, but they had not been awakened yet. But because of the ability of the Buddha to see where they were mentally, whether they were ready or not, he gives them the fire sermon. Guess what? During and after the talk, the Buddha now had 1,000 new arahants. Each and every one of them experienced the fullest that their mind could experience. They all were now equal. So when we use these words, so they are so loaded with meaning. So Buddha is such a heavy word in a sense. So when you're using the word Buddha, all these images come in, but you're still anchored on the physical living experience. Instead of being stripped away into the past, into these images, they're there to inspire us, yes. But can you walk with Buddha, for example? When you walk into a room, do you know which foot you're walking in with when you're brushing your teeth? Which hand are you using? How are you holding the toothbrush? Can you practice Buddha there? So in this way, it becomes part and parcel of your living experience. We're not transported into the past, into the image and the lovely stories. They're there to inspire us, yes. But I'm here to live my life and reach Nibbana through my life. Because that's all we got. So that is what we are taking refuge in, ultimately. But the better version of it, where Buddha comes to inspire us. So I hope that addresses. Bante, I think it's time.
Okay, Chandan, that's good. Time is running out. Thank you, Chandan, again, being with us today. Hope to see you soon. And maybe next month is going to give another talk for you. Right now, we're going to chanting, a little bit Pali chanting and English chanting also. And before that, I want to mention a few things. Next week, Venerable Panyaloka is going to give a Dhamma talk. So we're going to chant right now.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Bhavatu
Sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata. Sabba buddhanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata. Sabba dhammanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata. Sabba sanghanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. Nyeng di du kong po kap o ya di nyai dang du sung sang e yai gong thai pa da. Nyeng di du kong po kap o ya di nyai dang du sung sang e yai gong thai pa da. Nyeng di du kong po kap o nya di nhai dang du sung sang e nhai gong thai pa da. Om Mani Padme Om.
Thank you again. Thank you all the monks here participate, and thank you Ashan. Thank you all the members who participate today for the Sunday service. I mentioned earlier the next week is going to give a talk, Venerable Panyaloka. And if you can help to the temple, send him some contribution. You can go to our web page and all the details there. You can send any contribution to temple under this pandemic time. Again, thanks for everybody. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, you all be well and happy. Thank you.